Yup. The first anime film that I ever watched other than Ghibli was Your Name, or also known by its Japanese title, Kimi no Nawa. And I actually knew that it was coming out. I knew that the director was super famous for having incredible artwork, very, very well known in Japan. But I couldn't wait for it to come out in theaters. So I actually watched it online. I'm not proud of this. I watched it online and I watched it with the English subtitles, and I'm really glad I did because when I went to go watch it in the theater a week later, I realized that my Japanese was not advanced enough to understand the story as deeply as I wanted to. Because it is a deep story, there is science involved. There's a lot of mythology and legend and older traditional things in Japan, and I just feel like because I had prepped myself by watching it with English subtitles, I could understand it more deeply. The most embarrassing part of watching it in theaters was that when the lights came up and I looked around, my red-eyed monster just cried for an hour and a half face was looking around at the stoic, deadpanned, emotionless people in the theater. And there may have been other people crying. There may have been other people that felt something inside, but I couldn't tell. I was so embarrassed. It was so embarrassing. But to this day, Your Name is one of my favorite movies, and after watching Suzume and Garden of Words, he's like, him and Miyazaki, him and Hayao Miyazaki, who created Ghibli, are my favorite anime film. The cheese! Anime film. Back to the best anime films that are not Ghibli, because I feel like Ghibli is just like a whole movement on its own, and I am a huge fan of Ghibli films and Hayao Miyazaki, but let's put that aside. He gets enough acclaim. Let's talk about the best anime movies, in my opinion, that are not Ghibli films. I don't really have any ranking or order for this. I'm also just reminiscing, looking back on all the anime movies that I've seen and thinking about all the ones that I really loved. Here are a few that maybe you haven't heard of. I really want to talk about Ghibli, but I'll save that for another time. A anime film that I really loved is one called A Whisker Away, and it's on Netflix, I believe, and it's a story about a girl and a cat. I remember it being good, but it must not have been that good because I only watched it once and I can't really remember the plot. But I do remember it being very mystical and lots of magic and fantasy, and it was a heartwarming story about a girl and a cat. I know there's more to it, but it's just been so long that I can't remember. Moving on. The Boy and the Beast, I think it's called. This was a movie that I only watched once as well, but I remember it imprinting into my mind being very funny and very inspirational about a bond that is beyond blood. And it's kind of like an adoption story, but it's about a boy who enters into another world, and in that world there are beasts instead of people, and he kind of gets like sort of adopted or taken under the wing of a very strong man, and a lot of other stuff happens and they save Shibuya. It's a really awful explanation and recap, partially because I can't remember all the nitty-gritty details, but I do remember the art being kind of old school but very beautiful beats and moments, and magic and fantasy intertwining with a very real scene that I would see every single day, the Shibuya crossing, was really good. I remember the story being really good. I was very deep in my going to church era, and I remember it being like really speaking to my heart about faith and believing in people and having a change of heart through human connection. The next one, I remember the story a little bit more, a lot more, because I've seen this movie so many times, and it is not for the faint of heart. And if you are a crier, get two boxes of tissues. This one is A Silent Voice and also on Netflix. I've seen this movie probably more than 5 times in the last 5 years. And it's just, not only is it a film that I thought was over and then it wasn't. Like it did one of those where I was like, oh my God, it's over. And then it wasn't. And it's so real. The story is so real. There's such a variety of characters. There are characters, but there's such a variety of characters, but there's not really like a hero or like a perfect person or a redeeming quality. Like it's not like a hero story. It's very real. It's very uncomfortable. And it's a story about a boy who bullied a young girl who was deaf. And growing up, the dynamics of being a child and being stupid and making mistakes and misunderstanding and growing up and what kind of effect that has on other people and just the reasons for each of the characters for doing the things that they do and the way that they come together, and it's just so raw and real and uncomfortable, and I felt so many emotions and turmoil, and at the end it's good. If you're afraid of it having like leaving you feeling sad or leaving you feeling in despair or in darkness, it is a story. It is a inspiring story and it is very heartfelt. It'll put you through an emotional roller coaster, so just be prepared. Ooh, I should watch Look Back right now. And then I can add that to this list. I'm going to talk about 3 movies that came from Makoto Shinkai. Your Name was the first one that I saw by him, Kimi no Nawa, and it is my all-time favorite. There's magical realism, there's fantasy, there's very real amazing human relationships, and romance and funny and beautiful. The art is beautiful, and this is a film, and I'll say it over and over again. The music makes you feel exactly what you're supposed to be feeling in the moment. Everything about that movie is perfect. The other 2 movies he made are Garden of Words and Suzume. Garden of Words is also very beautiful. To watch his movies just to see the cinematography, the art, and the music is alone would be a gift. But to also know that he writes such incredible stories and he writes very authentic relationships and human dynamics really well. Garden of Words was a movie that my fiance really likes it. And we started watching it. And he's had some L's with me because he was like, I really love No Game, No Life. Let's watch it. I watched it growing up and we started watching it. And that one was not for me. Since then, we've had a lot of wonderful experiences and recommendations together. We've been really enjoying Free Ren and Dan, but No Game, No Life was a miss. Garden of Words is beautiful. And it is a story of a teacher and a student. Nothing crazy happens. There's no spice, but it's a very pure story of 2 people connecting in a forbidden kind of way, in what feels forbidden, what feels unorthodox, but it's a real human connection and the implications and the consequences of that. Suzume had me ballin'. I don't want to say too much. Suzume is just another example of how Makoto Shinkai writes incredible stories. I personally really love when there's fantasy or magical realism integrated into very normal, authentic lives or stories about regular people. So Kimi no Nawa, Your Name did that, and Suzume also did that, where it's a story of a girl in Japan, but there's spiritual elements, there's fantasy and magical realism. So yeah, let's just say dragons. And you learn, if you look into it, I can do an in-depth Suzume discussion where I tell you all of the references to Japanese philosophy, religion, belief, and spirituality because there are so many in Suzume, so much symbolism, so much symbolism that it was really, really fascinating to look into. And also, Suzume is inspired by a very real tragedy that happened. So I don't really want to say too much because I really, really want you to experience it for yourself. Suzume is also an amazing, amazing movie that touched my heart and personally means so, so, so much to the Japanese people. Also, there's a cat in it. Who doesn't love cats? Those are just some anime films that I really have loved. I've watched several of them several times, and these are the anime that I recommend to people. Or if I'm hanging out with people that aren't big anime watchers, movies like Kimi no Na wa and Suzume are not only a way for me to share my culture with other people like family members and friends, but also are a really easy for anybody to appreciate anime form of anime. Highly recommend them. Let me know if you've seen them or if you have more recommendations or more suggestions. But I personally felt like that wasn't enough and I wanted to have one more suggestion. So I thought maybe I can go watch Look Back, which is the one of my favorite manga one-shots by Tatsuki Fujimoto, the creator of Chainsaw Man. I did a video about all his works. That if you want to check it out, you can. But they made a movie adaptation yeah, they made a movie adaptation of my favorite manga one shot about a girl who has a dream to be a manga artist, and she finds an unlikely friendship in what she thought was a competitor, and it is Tatsuki Fujimoto's answer to why am I doing this? Why do I draw? Why do I live my life when bad things happen and tragedies happen and life is so unfair and it seems so silly to follow our dreams and do what we want to do and live our lives the way we do. But in the movie, he explores his reason. And I loved the manga, and I'm sure I will love the movie as well. Let's check it out. I already love it. Like, what is that intro? That is so Tatsuki Fujimoto. Yeah, look back. Wow.